Thanks so much. Let's start. All right, so hi everyone, thank you for making it to my presentation today. Let me just move this little screen thing, okay. I'll first like to say that this is an identity-driven piece and is coming from my lived experience, and I'm by no means an expert in this area of study and probably never will be because it's such a complex and layered thing for me. But I hope if you can connect with my story, it will help you begin your own conversations about identity. So I'm just gonna start by talking about where this question about my identity first started for me. And it started last semester in my GD4 class with Lisa Verskovsky, where she asked me to create an artist book about my geography. And it's the first time someone has asked me to really think about where I'm coming from and what that means for me. So I ended up creating this artist book, which was a culmination of both aspects of my ancestry, my abuela and my meme, and kind of the life lessons as role models they kind of taught me as I was growing up and how they kind of formed into who I am today. So from that, I started asking myself a lot, like, what is my identity? Like, I have these two cultures, but how do they kind of mesh and mend into who I am and how I present myself today? Um, so this is little Daniel. So he's like quarter of my current size, but at this point I had no clue what the color of my skin meant, but I knew I was different. And from an early age, I was always really, really proud to have a Hispanic background. I loved going to see my abuela in New Jersey, hearing her speak Spanish. It was so fascinating to me. But as I grew up, I found myself wondering if I could even claim that part of me because I didn't speak Spanish. And I grew up in this small white town in Connecticut and lived in a small neighborhood with this group of people. And while growing up, I really enjoyed my childhood and didn't really question it because it was my normal. This white space was my everyday. But then at some point, I think I started questioning like what that meant for me as a person of color. And when someone like saw me walking down the street, do they assume I came from this environment here, or are they coming in and perceiving me in a way that I don't necessarily identify with? And that's kind of where this term cultural dysmorphia stemmed from for me. So I felt like this phrase really described how I felt when it came to my identity. And it's this feeling that the way people perceive me and my identity didn't necessarily correlate to how I internally identify, but also I had no idea how I was supposed to identify myself. And then I made this visual representation and I decided to bring it into this part of the slide just because it really represents this feeling of entering into this dysmorphic state for me. And it really feels like I only have one foot in right now and I'm just starting to uncover what it means to talk about identity from my background and my perspective. I would also like to say that I'm not a very vulnerable person by any means. So when it first came starting this project, it was heavily not focused on my perspective, but more on the idea of decolonization. But I wanted to touch on that research before I move deeper into my own perspective. So when I first started this project, I really focused on looking at designers that were doing work similar to what I wanted to do already. So that's when I found Zuli Segura, Ramon Tejada, and Gam. And they were all creating work about identity, about BIPOC in the design space. Zuli created the Latinx Design Directory, which gave representation to Latinx designers and gave a space for people to find us. Ramon created the Decolonizing Design Reader, which was an open source reading and resources kind of platform for people to like just dive in and start talking about this and considering how it affected them and the implications that it had. And GAM created the aspect ratio, which was a video podcast format, just sitting down and having open conversations and allowing people to take away what they could from it. So from that, I ended up doing just a ton of research and a ton of reading. And these are just a selection of my articles and videos that I dived into. And all of them were very impactful for me. And for instance, Dory Turnstile in the bottom right, she's the dean at OCAN in Canada, has such amazing things to say about how do we as designers approach accountable relationships? How do we interact with communities and learn together? And are we being reactionary? Are we putting our own biases and desires onto communities? Or are we sitting down and asking them what they actually need and working as a collaboration? So that's kind of where a lot of my research stemmed from the beginning. Even the top right was a Latinx panel just talking about art and design from a Latinx perspective. And one of the panelists said, the Latinx community is not a monolithic group. And I think that's the first time I really heard someone say that. And it was kind of a turning point for me because I always just considered the Hispanic community to be the same, that highly represents like indigenous background, all kind of look the same. And it was the first time that I kind of stepped back and was like, wait, there's so many more identities under this umbrella that is Latinx, that is Hispanic, and I can belong in that space. Um, so from there, I did have the great opportunity to talk to Ramon, Kelly, and Gom throughout my project. And from these conversations, I definitely found more of an urge to focus on my personal perspective and inquiry. Gom definitely asked me just to like think about what I would have wanted as a young designer, what would I wanted to see that would impact me and allow me to be farther along than I am now. And then Ramon and I talked a lot about the questions that I had because I had so many and they were just swirling around. And why can't the questions just be the outcome? Why can't they be the highlight of my inquiry? And then Kelly talked about like, what does my perspective have to say? What are the emotive qualities in the shared experience that I can offer to people? So from these conversations, I really decided to shift my focus to be more about the questions and about my own perspective. And I kind of created this list of 5 words that became the cornerstone of my project: questions, reflection, collaboration, connection, and vulnerability. And they ended up turning into this web of inquiry process for me. So I wanted to start my inquiry by looking at the questions and my own vulnerability in sharing, and see how that could allow me to connect, to showcase, to have conversations, to reflect and collaborate with other people, and lead to this unexpected outcome that at the time I had no idea what it would be, which was exciting, but also really scary as a designer. So from there, my final researchable question was, how has my feeling of cultural dysmorphia shaped how I perceive myself? And what are ways to connect with others that have this shared experience? Um, so from there, I just kind of went with that idea of questions, like how can these questions that I have drive me? And I first just started by opening up a Google Doc and just writing down my questions that I had in the moment. And they're kind of all over the place, from why can't I speak Spanish to what cultures can I claim? Am I an outsider within? How do I responsibly address my identity? How do we mend the fracture? What do I need? And from here, I just kind of shifted my research away from the decolonized and design education space and focusing more on other people's perspectives and what they had to say about being mixed or being in this dysmorphic and liminal space in America. So that's when I kind of started these readings. And there's many other ones, but these were like the 3 that I think really impacted me the most. Um, and particularly Ocean Vuong wrote his about his perspective as a mixed person in Connecticut, which was exciting for me because since that's where I grew up, it was amazing to hear someone else share their story. Um, and one thing he said that really like resonated with me is he stated, sometimes you're erased before you're given the choice of stating who you are. And I think as a mixed person, as a person of color in America, a lot of the times we are told who we are and told what we represent before we even understand what that means for ourselves and how we want to represent and what we want to uphold. So I think that was impactful for me just to hear someone else like say that. And then Ramon actually suggested this reading, Borderlands La Ventura, The New Mestiza by Gloria Adanzula. And it was definitely probably one of the most impactful readings, just thinking about liminal space and thinking about this dysmorphic world that I was entering into. She was talking more about a physical liminal space, which is the border in Texas and Mexico, and this new culture that's forming between these people that are stuck in between and aren't really accepted from either side and kind of have to forge their own way. And in that space, creating a new culture. And one quote that I think really resonated with me is she said, I am an act of needing, I'm an act of uniting and joining that not only has produced both a culture of darkness and a culture of light, but also a creature that questions the definition of light and dark and gives that new meaning. And for me, this is the moment that I shifted from looking at my identity as a fractured feeling and an unsettling feeling and a nervous feeling, and more as an exciting opportunity for exploration. And how can I shift my view of thinking about my mixed identity as an opportunity to connect with so many other people? And how do I shift my narrative? And then Brown Bohemians was a lovely book because it really allowed me just to look at different BIPOC artists and their perspectives and how they are creating work around their perspectives. And Lily Lopez in the beginning said this quote, which probably one of my favorite quotes from this whole project. And it said, vulnerability is sharing with no fear that what you share will be used against you, releasing uncomfortable emotions, building a support system for yourself and others, and creating genuine bonds with others. And this is when I was like, okay, Daniel, it's time to be vulnerable. You've tried to hold back, but it just needs to happen. And I think part of my fear with vulnerability is being judged and saying things that aren't necessarily right, and people taking what I say and making assumptions about it. But I think the important part of vulnerability is just opening up and just letting your thoughts be heard, and then allowing people to respond to that, and then growing from the thoughts that you were having. So from here, I just kind of created this whole archive of quotes, and I think it was important for me to kind of have a system of where everything would lie for me to look back on and kind of reference, because there's so many thoughts and moments that I had that were like epiphanies, and I would quickly forget them because it's such a never-ending topic for me. But from here, I really wanted to shift into that vulnerable space and have conversations with people in my life. So I talked to three of my friends, Jacob, Kat, and Nori, about their own perspectives and their own experiences. And it was really nice to just sit down and talk to people that had these shared experience that had been in my life, but we've just never talked about this before for some reason. And I think that's something that I realized is like, we just don't talk about it, but why? So I really wanted just to start having those conversations. And I'm actually going to share a clip with you from Jacob, where I asked him how the phrase cultural dysmorphia resonated with him.
Um, Hearing that phrase, I already connect to it emotionally, like on an emotional level, just because I guess my understanding of dysmorphia is like confusion and possibly feeling like out of body, possibly feeling that way. So I guess, I mean, I can only speak for me specifically, but
Yeah.
I if I want to put it like simply, maybe this is not politically correct, but mentally I'm white. So like in the way that I say that is like I grew up with an all white family. I was adopted into an all white family, all white friends, blah blah blah. So I don't know like my black culture. Like I don't like I feel a disconnect there, but I am black. So I guess that's where like the dysmorphia comes from. And then also I don't look black or white, so then I don't get treated like I'm black or white. So then what am I? Like I'm an
Mhm.
other.
So that was kind of like the feeling that I was invoking in my project in the inquiry I was asking. And I think his statement really resonated with me because it made me feel for the first time not necessarily like alone in this project. Because it does feel like you can't relate to anyone because we all have a very specific identity. And it's hard for me to find someone that's half Honduran, half French Canadian that grew up in a white space that I can connect with. But then that's when I started shifting, thinking, well, I can't connect on specific labels, but we can connect on circumstance and emotions. And we all kind of feel lost in the same limbo space, and our experiences overlap. And in this overlap is that new culture that I was talking about, this new mestiza, this third space. Um, and that's where this phrase for me, legitimize your thoughts, kind of came to the forefront. And it's kind of like a mantra at this point that I say every time I start my research is like, how do I start to use what other people are saying to put my thoughts and my emotions and my feelings into word, by collaborating off of what they were saying in the beginning to kind of form my own language about my identity. So from there, that's when I shifted to just start making things. And this was a big part of my process. It's just like creating a lot of these stickers, creating these visual pieces that kind of just allowed me to explore my identity. I first started by making this sticker, and it says I can't speak Spanish, and it really just represents how I feel. It feels like I need to have an armband on me at all times that say I can't speak Spanish, because after making this sticker, I realized, especially at work, how many people come up to me and just automatically speak Spanish to me. And I have no idea what they're saying, but because of how I look, they just assume. And I wish I was a part of that, but I'm not. And a big part of this sticker was for me, it kind of just feels like when you enter a bar and you're under 21 and you have to put on a little band that signifies to everyone that you can't drink, and everyone's around you drunk, having fun, connecting, and you're there like, well, I'm just not at the same level and I can't really connect with anyone. Why am I here? So that's kind of how I felt a lot of the times. And then also, it's just like these moments of like, shit, when did this hole get here? Like, why do I feel so empty? And when did that feeling start? And I think I don't know when it started for me specifically. Maybe it was high school, maybe it was before. But this is the first time that I removed the first layer and I'm realizing it's a never ending pit. And then I also created this little book that is literally just quotes, all quotes stitched together that kind of are forming this narrative that I want to be telling, and moving forward. just more stickers, like how do I take these phrases that I'm kind of using and just put them in visual spaces around me? Or is it a website that just kind of has my questions and allows people to respond to those? Like, what are the ways that I can communicate my questions to other people? That's when I kind of just sat down and put a big piece of paper on my wall and just really wrote down more questions. Took some questions from my original list, but then just started allowing them to form new questions. And I think that process was really exciting because just asking one question could lead to 50 more. Um, and that's when I started thinking about my audience more. And it is for people that do experience what I have, people that feel like they're also trapped in this liminal space and don't know how to navigate it. For the people that feel like others and don't necessarily feel like they belong to any particular group. And I think what's exciting is it's not just mixed people, it's people that are studying abroad here and feel like can't, they have to assimilate to this white culture, or it's people that aren't mixed but grew up in very white spaces, or it's just people that just don't know how to identify because of society's expectations of them. So I wanted to take this poster and I did a short little workshop with the people in a Zoom room I was in, where I just asked them to look at my questions and then just start asking questions about their own identity and what questions were starting to form. And I think automatically it was very exciting for me to see their questions, because instantly I started forming new questions based off of their questions. And that's why this idea of like collaboration came in for me. Like, I'm not interested in this just being my project. Like, I really want in the future to collaborate and to share these thoughts and to like open up this space for conversation. And even just someone saying, am I too white? Like, that statement alone was impactful for me and allowed me to open up a whole new world of inquiry moving forward. So by creating all of these, I kind of looked at them as artifacts in my research and discovery, almost in a way mapping out a way to look back at how I was thinking and beginning the conversation for myself. So that just led me to my final direction, which was taking these artifacts and presenting them as my research, mainly in hopes that people would connect with the phrase, mainly for the people that connect with the phrase culture dysmorphia and can see how my vulnerability with the topic could start to begin conversations about their own identity with the people around them. So all my research and inquiry ended up culminating into these objects that I'm calling artifacts of my cultural dysmorphia. These artifacts are a reflection of my identity exploration and attempt to provide a view into the beginning of my new experience navigating the liminal space I reside in. I decided to create my final deliverable as a collection of these pieces, as I wanted to really just share my story and my vulnerability. My goal from the beginning was never to tell people how to do this, but I really just wanted to create something that would show the steps I took to start this conversation and hope that other people would start asking questions for themselves. So these are my artifacts. They kind of spanned out. I will say these are a few. I made many other things that just aren't here because I just, my brain was exploding, but I really just wanted to visually capture how I was feeling through artifacts. So just going in closer to some of them, this artifact in particular is the result of a 2.5 hour long conversation with my family. Like I said before, I'm not vulnerable. I don't have these conversations with my family. I don't really open up about how I feel about identity, but this project definitely pushed me into those uncomfortable spaces, and I wanted to feel discomfort. I wanted to see what that discomfort would lead to. So I just asked one question, and then it ended up being 2.5 hours, and I thought it'd be 30 minutes. And it kind of culminated into all these stories meshing together into who I am. And some of my questions were answered, like why can't I speak Spanish was answered. And I think that was really exciting for me. By just asking questions, I was seeing answers and being able to connect. And I think I was able to connect with my family on a much larger level than I ever have before. Or is it just these visual representations that I kind of were crafting throughout my exploration? Like, what does it feel like to be in this liminal space? And like, if someone had this above them on their desk and they looked at it, would they be able to connect and be able to feel like, yes, I'm also in this space. Where do I go now? I also created this book that I call Collaborative Thought, and it's about how can I build off of the thoughts of other people and how they have started to share their feelings about this topic. So in a bound form, it kind of just is a chaos and everything meshes together. And it really feels like this dysmorphic state of quotes just meshing, and you can't really figure out how they all connect, but it's meant to be deconstructed and put in a flat plane to kind of begin to, one, force you to interact with the piece and just go step by step, looking at each page closely and seeing how they do connect, but then looking at the bigger story and how all these voices are saying all these different things, but they all align and connect. And then I included my identity questions poster, and I thought this one for me is just One of the most important, just because it really is about the questions, and I think the questions have so much to say. Um, and then I created this little notebook that's just a space to write down reflection. And it starts by saying, I'm spiraling and just need to write down my thoughts before my head explodes. And it really represents how I felt doing this project. I just needed a space to write down all these feelings and thoughts. And then everything kind of culminated into this web space because I wanted it to be as accessible as possible. So I kind of created a space where people can interact with my artifacts in a way that kind of can replicate the physical sense. Um, yeah, so, and you can zoom in and really get to look at things closely and interact with them and allow you to really like discover what I'm trying to say and what the conversations were and see like the bigger picture about each piece. And then I also wanted people to be able to take these artifacts and just put them in the space that they are already in. So everything links to a Google Drive folder where you can just print out the PDFs, and everything was meant to be tiled. So you can just print, trim, and assemble and put in your space. And I think that's how I made all of them. I just used my printer. And it was really nice to see like that it can be done just in the space you already are. And then I just included like another space to download what I want, what I hope this conversation is, and this map of inquiry that I hope other people can use for their own. What's next? So definitely a break. I think my mind needs to step back from this topic, but I really do hope to continue this exploration beyond this project. I like to look at this as volume one because there is still so much more to uncover. I want to start collaborating, finding ways to collaborate with people that are also in this liminal space and share not only my story, but showcase so many others. And part of my art practice is photography. So I want to look at ways I can bring that lens of vulnerability into the work I create, and how can I create space for representation. There is so much to be done, and it's exciting that asking that one question, what is my identity, has created an endless space for connection and inspiration for me. And I just wanted to, again, thank you all for being here. And I want to say a special thanks to all the people that really impacted and helped me get my project to where it is today. So thank you to Ramon, Kelly, Gom, Nandini, Fish, Catherine, and Lisa, and so many other people for helping to guide me through a space that I didn't know how to start navigating. And thank you all, and thank you to all the people in my life who opened up with me as I started to form conversations around this topic. Thank you.